I think I'm live, perhaps. So this is just me continuing my journey to become a fully fledged blood sports YouTuber. So thanks for coming if you were watching. Um, yeah, so I'm hoping everything looks okay. I hope I've fixed the focus issue out and or fixed the focus issue up. And I'm a bit hungover right now, so you'll have to forgive me for looking a bit blurry. Yeah, blood sports is shit. Yeah, being facetious. I think I think my biggest challenge is just I think on screen confidence. I really admire even the real psychos online. I really admire their ability just to be so coherent and speak without umming and ahhing and yeah, get them. And I think my problem at the moment is I watched my last one and I was like dropping a lot of your nose and really inappropriate nervous laughter. I think that's why I'm also not putting my live streams out because I've been laughing at a few things which might not look so good. A few, yeah. So yeah, and so I found a yesterday on the last live stream. I mentioned that there was some New Zealand far right types online who we could watch. I kind of feel a bit bad bringing them up because they sort of seem quite emotionally dysregulated, if that's the right term. I don't want to bring mental health into this because you don't have to be mentally ill. People aren't racist by inherently, but I guess we and if I feel a bit guilty. It's almost like you're sort of teasing some of these people because they clearly have a few things to work through, but at the same time they're putting themselves out there and, in my opinion, causing a bit of damage, particularly with the first person we look at, who is based in Christchurch. There's something going on in Christchurch. I thought maybe if someone's watching me and you're in Christchurch, tell me what that is. Whatever that kind of weird Christchurch is, the Christchurch mind. Anyway, this guy. So so I don't want to spend much more time on internet cranks. I'm sort of getting a bit focused. I don't want to spend much more time with internet cranks. They kind of. I'm not saying they bore me. I mean, there's a strange compulsion to watch them because it's a strange entertainment involved. Like if you're watching, it's like it's a freak show. It's like touring Bedlam or something, and we know they're really hateful and nasty and stuff. But it's almost like you can't believe that they're this weird. Yeah. Oh dear, you can suddenly read every spine on my bookshelf. So now you're gonna take a screenshot. You're going to blow it up and find out the fucked up shit that I'm into. Okay, so the first person, his name is actually. By the way, this will give us this. If you're not from New Zealand, this will give you a kind of a brief overview of our far right, and yeah, the bell curve. Ugh. I have Julius Evola as well. That's a joke, and you get a good overview of the far right in this country, and maybe in another video I'll talk about more interesting things, like if you're watching this and you're interested in the politics of Jacinda Ardern and the history of our labour movement and why New Zealand is the way we are politically. But this guy, okay, I'm going to have to bring this guy up. He's a real handsome devil. Here we go. So, his name is Lee Williams. Lee Williams. And he is on YouTube. I think since this video, he's worked out how to turn his mobile phone around and do landscape mode. He's got a bit of a following, actually. I think he's got something like a couple of 1,300 subscribers, which is quite successful for this country. And he's really deeply disturbed. He's really a piece of work. I don't want to say disturbed. I don't want to bring mental illness into this. Why New Zealanders are the way we are, being racist against New Zealand colonial. We'll get to this actually, because I'm going to go right into this. This is an interesting. If you're not from New Zealand, you're going to learn a little bit about the kind of weird beliefs which are actually quite unique to this country, which come from our colonial history. So this guy, I'm just going to breeze past him. He's not really worth talking too much about. I found him because he's been harassing Byron C. Clark. Again, follow Byron C. Clark on Twitter. He's got good content. He monitors fascists in this country, and this guy, whose name again is Lee Williams, he has been doxing and harassing Byron. So he's quite typical of someone who downloads that kind of Tommy Robertson, that whole milieu of Islamophobic wingnuttery, really. And I'm just gonna just to play a quick excerpt. This is the most noxious person. My God. So
this isn't every country in Western Europe, and nothing is being said by it about it, shall I say? And plus, most of the birth defects amongst newborns in Britain, well, I say proportionally, I think it's like 30 or 40% are from Islamic backgrounds because of basically inbreeding, and they're marrying their first cousins, and it's creating real issues for childbirth and things like that.
So you get a taste of it. You just go on and on. But he, in this video, if you notice the date on that video, the date stamp on that video, it's weeks from when Christchurch terrorist attack happened. And so he's actually literally a stone's throw from that mosque. And this was 2 weeks before and he's talking about Muslim birth rates. I think at one point in this video he likens Muslims to animals. I think if you could find this video on YouTube, please flag it. It really should be taken down. And yes, he is a Scouser. I was trying to pick. I always get Geordies and Scousers mixed up. And I lived in the UK for 15 years, or 13 to 15 years, and it's off and on. And like, there's a real deep irony with a Scouser waxing lyrically about immigration. And if you get involved in national politics or politics, party politics of this country, you will find a British person in every party, every local party. British immigrants tend to get very politically active when they come to this country. For better or worse, we have some real staunch socialists here and some real Little Englanders as well. So we get the best and worst, a real varying range of them. And so if you go to a news agency here, you'll find that there's the Daily Express, which is a newspaper which is quite looked on with a bit of scorn in the UK. It's quite quasi-fascist rag. And it gets sold here, and you have to wonder who are the people who read this stuff, the international edition of the Daily Express, and it's people like this gentleman, Mr. Lee Williams, who lives in Christchurch, and I don't know if I'm going to force you to watch this the video of him singing a song. They're not very good with self-reflection. they're not very self-aware, and you can find videos of him singing singing parody songs. I think he does a version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, but with Jacinda Ardern is taking over or something as the chorus. It's it's funny, but it's funny to watch. But then you realize, well, was the terrorist watching this? Does he know the terrorist? I don't know. I mean, he must be on someone's radar, and if he isn't, at least go and find this video and flag it down. And that's Lee Williams. Now, there's this other person I learnt about, and he's been quite successful in America. He doesn't really have much of a following here, although he was part of a political party here. He was actually an executive member of our libertarian style party, and his name's Trevor Loudon, and he actually has had some impact in America. He's influence. He's been quite influential in America. And what happened was in the mid 2000s he started running a blog, and he's been obsessed with communism, like obsessed with Reds under the bed. The sort of person who will try and find the membership lists of a political party, and then see that time they attended a meeting with the Stop the War Coalition, and then listing them as communists, kind of thing. And so he was writing this blog from New Zealand, and then we got to take this guy's face off the screen. My God. And he was running this blog, and then Glenn Beck started reading it, like maybe doing his own quote unquote research, and picked this guy up out of obscurity. And this guy now lives in America. He does the whole circuit, runs around the circuit, and what he's saying is of little relevance to people in this country, in Aotearoa New Zealand, but he certainly he's like I don't think he has much relevance in Trump's America either, to be honest, because I think that whole heyday of thinking that describing Obama as a socialist, communist, Muslim menace. Now I think socialists in America are a lot more forthright. Like they don't have to run away from it like they used to. If you're American, please clarify this. But I get the impression that there isn't the same stigma involved with calling oneself a socialist. Anyway, this guy, but you listen to his accent, it's hilarious. Oh, I have to go into it.
My name is Trevor Loudon.
Trevor Loudon is a guy from New Zealand. He's a dad who was concerned about the world.
I'm an activist, author and researcher from Christchurch, New Zealand.
He is the official commie hunter.
For 5 years, I've been traveling to the United States to expose the greatest act of betrayal in modern history.
That old school communism that you saw with the USSR, it's not dead, it's alive and well.
Is this a child?
The United States, a country founded on the very principles of liberty and freedom, whose soldiers have shed blood for more than 200 years to protect, is now facing the most dangerous enemy it has ever seen, the enemy within.
I've been following your stuff for a long time, and it's overwhelming.
Why is America slowly sinking into poverty, despair, and socialism? Why is the American economy teetering on the brink of collapse? Why are the allies of the United States slowly backing away as its enemies become more brazen? Is this all an accident, perhaps a coincidence, or just inevitable decline? Or has this been a deliberately engineered attack on the greatest nation the world has ever seen?
We actually have bad actors who have penetrated our system, basically making decisions the way Iran and North Korea and China and Russia would like us to make.
Yeah, you get the idea. he was a baker in Christchurch. I think he worked as a baker, and he now does the rounds in America, just quote unquote researching communist infiltration of government. And I think people like Glenn Beck and that those kinds of demagogues use him as a source. I don't think he's I don't think he's necessarily. You could just see by the way he talks, he's not quite fit for prime time. Like, he's got some serious crank energy going on there, but he certainly has a bit of influence. And in this country, I went through last night and started listening to him, and he doesn't fit in. He definitely doesn't fit into this country in New Zealand. He said much himself. So that's quite interesting, that someone who can't find a political home in New Zealand goes to America and gets embraced by a certain a whole movement over there. But basically, in fact, he spoke at CPAC, the Conservative Political, whatever CPAC stands for, convention, and it must have been probably the biggest moment of his career, even. And I want to play this bit because it's quite cute the way his little icebreaker where he describes his accent as Southern, which is technically correct.
Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Trevor Loudon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay? Can you understand the Southern accent? Okay. Look, I have a perspective. America, I say this, World War III started about 1400 years ago, and it got a big boost in 1917 with the Bolshevik Revolution. And those two streams, Islam and the Bolsheviks, have never parted company. But I just want to say why I care about the United States and your national security. I come from a little country in the bottom of the South Pacific, and in World War II, our boys were all in North Africa fighting the Nazis, and the Japanese were coming down through the islands, and if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, we would have been done.
Okay, so this is quite creepy what he's doing here. He's trying to ingratiate himself. He's obviously sold himself on this cult of America. Whatever. I'm not trying not to offend you if you're an American in this chat, but he's kind of, I don't want to say that. How do I say this without? I'm trying to find the most neutral way of saying it. He's bootlicking, and that whole teary-eyed thing is really performative nonsense, because I've been watching his stuff. He always does that, and also factually he's been incorrect as well, because during World War II, so this is really interesting. So World War II, he's correct to say New Zealand troops were stationed. Our theatres of battle were North Africa and Italy, Europe. And we did invite American military presence onto New Zealand soil because there was a threat. There was a very real fear of Japanese invasion, and I think the Japanese even sent reconnaissance planes and submarines to spy on us. And we had prisoners of war camps here, which housed Japanese internment camps, which housed Japanese. Not internment camps, so that was an American thing. Prisoners of war camps, of actual Japanese prisoners of war, and the fear of the what do they call it, the yellow peril, was just really palpable. I think my grandmother's generation, I think some of these families were so afraid that they would have cyanide ready just in case the Japanese invaded, so they could poison their whole family. Crazy times. But, but, the Japanese were never going to invade this country. We didn't have the resources that they needed. We didn't. They had to go through Australia to get to us. There's a whole bunch of variables that Japan didn't intend to come to New Zealand. And the way he's sobbing about how America saved us just doesn't ring true. It's like how if there's a burglary happening in your neighborhood, so you buy a Rottweiler, a fierce dog, and then you think the dog protected you from a home invasion. That's the analogy. He's stroking that Rottweiler and saying how he got saved from the burglar when he's missed a step there. Anyway, I just found it's just really cheesy stuff. Yeah. So, an article that said Christchurch has always had a problem with racist weirdos. Yeah, Christchurch, there is an issue. It's New Zealand does have racism, and which we haven't even got to the really, really kooky shit yet. New Zealand does have some pretty racist stuff, real outright racism, but all over the country. But when you hear the really weird racist stuff, you kind of, in your head, you always think, must be Christchurch, and then you find out it is, and you think, yeah, I thought so. And that happened with the shooting. It's horrible to be right. Oh, it was Christchurch, and it was. But they have their local rugby team is called the Crusaders, and they have their mascot is like a like a knight. They go on coming on horses. This is like the imagery, the iconography in a city which has a Muslim community of crusaders, almost burning cross. It might as well just be burning crosses or something. It's really yeah, it's a bit weird. Some weird shit's there, and mostly it's because it's probably one of the whitest parts of the country. So I'll show you a map soon. I'll show you guys a map soon of this country, how it got settled, the settlement of this country. But essentially, the further south you go, the whiter and less ethnically diverse it gets, and strangely enough, also the more racist people express themselves. I know. I have very close friends who have tattoos on visible parts of their bodies. Let's say their face. They have facial tattoos, which is it's people. The difference between the North Island and the South Island is that North Island people will be a bit more curious about it, whereas the South Island people will be a bit more discriminatory about it. It's I don't want to get too reductive because racism's everywhere, but yeah. So and what do you know? This actually leads right into New Zealand history. So I just want to talk really quickly about our history. So if you don't know anything about how this country was founded, this is I can't really do it justice because, like all countries, we've got it's all complicated mess. But you can see in this video, we can see this is actually a really good video. And if you're a New Zealander watching this, look up here Tohu, which is the exhibition. I think it's at the Archives, or maybe it's at the National Library now. I think it's the Archives, which is our national documents. They have an accompanying YouTube channel, and I recommend this. You could show your kids this. It's really cool. So next I've got to find it. Is this it? No. I've got so many windows open. Oh dear. Ah, okay. Will the stream be deleted? I won't delete it, but I will. I will do a private. I'll unlist it and you. I'll tweet the link or something. In fact, you've probably not really missed anything because this is kind of where I wanted to start anyway. Sorry to waste everyone else's time for the last half hour. Okay, so if you're from overseas watching New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand, this is a really good graphical depiction of our country becoming colonized or settled. So this is when they had the first migration, when people first arrived, and this is the pa site. So this is the with settlements, and then there were other migrations. Other big migrations happened, sort of, and trade began. This is all pre-European, by the way. This is Maori settlement of Aotearoa New Zealand, and yeah, so there was a Maori were in New Zealand, or Maori have been in New Zealand for I think around 700 years before Europeans. And these are the Europeans coming, by the way. Yes, so this is Abel Tasman and James Cook. So James Cook went around New Zealand. I'm going to play this at double speed. Oh, it is at double speed. How wonderful. And we had a whaling industry. And one chapter of our history which doesn't get talked about enough, which is really interesting, is Māori exploration of the world. So when Māori travelled to Europe, and particularly Hongi Hika, who's someone I'm quite interested in. He standardised the Māori language. He went to Cambridge University. Really good stuff. Really interesting stuff. With this, we had some missionaries. Like if you've ever seen that film, The Piano, with these sort of Harvey Keitel types who go rogue and run away from their families and get tattoos on their face, and there's some really interesting pre-settlement times. And then so this was in 1835 to 1839. This is when we had what was called He Whakaputanga, which is our Declaration of Independence. Okay, Up Syndrome says there are other people on New Zealand before Maori. Well, that's what we're going to get to, because this is what these far-right people believe, that there were people before Maori. So we had this document. It's called He Whakaputanga, which is the Declaration of Independence, and this is when New Zealand became a state, essentially became declared as a whole country, and it's been and also we got a new flag, and they display the flag here. Much cooler flag than we have now, but that is what it is. And then, so that's leading up to He Whakaputanga, and then in 1840 we had the Treaty of Waitangi, or Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and that was when the British Crown, by that time this country, there were British settlers in this country, and there were other nations building empires, such as France, and they were being complete bastards in the Pacific. That this country was being drawn into the orbit of the British Empire, basically, and so Britain created a treaty, and it's called the Treaty of Waitangi, and it's our founding document, basically, and what it does is it guarantees Maori the equal rights as British subjects, also citizens, but it also gives them sovereignty and gives them control over their resources. And there's two translations. There's the English translation and the Maori translation. And the person who wrote the Maori version he did it like the night before. I've seen it said on Twitter. It's like when you have to do an assignment and you cram at the last minute. So this person, you can kind of, presuming good faith on their part, they still got it wrong regardless, because you can look at the He Whakaputanga document and Te Tiriti, the treaty, and there's words which are different. And if there was consistency across the documents, it would be a lot easier to argue that the Maori version was, like they're using really specific words and words which mean for sovereignty and stuff like that. So essentially, what happened after the treaty was when large scale settlement began to happen. And when Māori began to assert their sovereignty, that's when we had the land wars. And so the next bit is the next little... I'm just trying to glide over this as much as possible. It's the land ownership itself. So... And this also explains... So... while this is Te Waipounamu, the South Island, was more sparsely settled, it's also you can see, look at that whole swathe of the South Island just got bought for nothing, like £2,000 or something, and this was powered by it was called the New Zealand Company, and the guy who founded it was he was a child abductor, and he founded the New Zealand Company in prison in the United Kingdom. And he just basically, here we go. So this is when this is the land wars period, where you can start seeing where land became confiscated. And so during this period, this is actually one of the most shameful periods of New Zealand history. But you can see how the entire South Island was a crown asset by that point, and settlement happened. Settlement happened mostly in the South Island. I've been talking this whole time, and you can't even see the map. What the fuck? Jesus Christ! I mean this map. Oh shit! I'm sorry, you guys. Yeah, I probably don't have any. Probably lost all my viewers now. Basically, you only have to look at it from here anyway. So you can see here that the South Island was completely gone to the Crown, and that was where people were settling here while the land wars were raging. There were settlers on the land wars, obviously, but the more larger scale. This is where the South Island became developed while they were basically waiting for the North Island to be conquered. And when I say conquered, I mean for the Crown to find an excuse to snatch Māori land. And that's what you're seeing here in this video. So you see all these little red, where the red happens, where the red, you can just see this is where for no other reason than time to confiscate. And you're seeing the gradual erosion of Māori land, which 100 years previously, 50 years previously, New Zealand was completely Māori. Now it became controlled by the Crown. So because of this treaty is a good deal for Māori, and there's not, all the Crown needs to do is to acknowledge it, but honour it is the right term. And basically, the treaty was just discarded for basically thereafter, and I don't say rediscovered, that's probably a bit of a loaded term, but in the mid 20th century was when Indigenous people actually began to start utilising political institutions to seek redress. So you're able to use the courts and something called the Waitangi Tribunal to use to bring the treaty back into focus. And the like in the 1980s, when the crown when the government started privatizing assets like our forests and our telecommunications and that kind of thing, a group of Maori forced through the High Court that now when you privatize, you have to get Maori sign off. So that Maori become key stakeholders and things like that. Now this angers the hell out of a lot of people who are white people who have only known their country, and by their country this kind of colonial outpost, this New Zealand, this they know what they know. And they're probably from British migrant stock. They're probably the children of people like Lee Williams, who we saw earlier, and they're really reactionary against this. And then there's this, and that's one part of New Zealand. Another part, most mainstream discourse in this country is concerned with even more sort of conservative people. They're not. You would say they appropriate Maori stuff, Maori like culture, because it's the only way to express. While some people might be more sincerely trying to help decolonize, because help Maori create a platform, decolonize, achieve sovereignty. There are people there are others who like Maori. They like that Maori have a special place in this country, and they like Maori culture, but they have a status quo. I would say they don't want to make any particular like sacrifices or anything. And then you have these far right people who seem very offended that Māori even exist, because Māori remind them of something awful about themselves, perhaps. It's a real, they're real nasty people, but what makes them really kooky is just how they, in order to sound rational, to make this a rational belief, they have to create stories. They have to create myths for themselves. And one of these myths is that Māori weren't the first people in this country. It's quite funny, actually, because any serious person would tell you that there was an indigenous people. They came down from the Pacific. They lived in this country for 700, 800 years. They're called Māori. But that's the establishment belief. That's the mainstream media. That's the academics and politicians telling you what to think, when actually there's a real truth, and that real truth that they're trying to hide is that the Celts arrived in this country. Or maybe not the Celts, maybe it was the Vikings. These people, it's really quite, again, kooky and funny to think of, to look at. But then you find out that if you go into rural New Zealand, some of these people will sell out a town hall giving talks about cryptoarchaeology, and some of these libraries will have books which the people check. The most popular books on the shelves there are books about the Celtic New Zealand. So, and also, like, some of these people just maybe sincerely, they sincerely believe this stuff. Like it's like, I think it's almost like Holocaust denial. I'm not going to liken this to the Holocaust. I'm not doing that, but just the frame of mind that some of the people who fall down that rabbit hole of Holocaust denial might not go into it with any particular ideological bend, but by the time they go out of it, they're certainly fully fledged neo-Nazis. And yeah, and so go these people. So this is a good example. Oh. Oh yeah, so we got the real indigenous people of New Zealand. Oh my gosh. Check this out, you guys.
Conventional history tells us that New Zealand was perhaps the last country to be populated by humanity.
Sorry, I have to stop. That accent is a real rural accent. That's like someone who lives on a farm and wears long johns or something.
Conventional history tells us that New Zealand was perhaps the last country to be populated by humanity. Located in the southernmost part of the Pacific, we are told that the first Polynesians arrived around 1300 AD, with perhaps the Moriori's arriving a couple of hundred years earlier.
See, he's already said the Moriori's as a matter of fact, and that's a myth. I mentioned in my last video, in my last live stream, that there is this persistent myth in this country that there were a people called the Moriori who arrived before Maori, and Maori ate them, which is actually a myth. It's not true. Absolutely not true. There were people settling in the Chatham Islands. Those people were Maori, but they get called by a lot of sort of these early European settlers who were obsessed with ancient civilizations. They began this myth that there were the first people to arrive here were called the Moriori, and they got overtaken by the Maori, and it became this. Even when I was growing up, I heard this. People, in fact, you could probably prick many New Zealanders, even liberal, right on Beyond Ponsant Kiwis. They will probably have heard this and might even just repeat it without much thought. That, oh yeah, there were these people before the Maori, they were called the Moriori. And that's not true. Not true at all.
In 1979, the Anthropology Department of Auckland University discovered, on private land, on Mount Tahanga at Opito Bay, Coromandel, an array of ancient standing stones. There was no excited announcement nor any media coverage, and so the matter was swept under the carpet, and the public in general were none the wiser. On the winter solstice of the 21st of June 2014, a small expedition, after gaining the owner's permission of course, went to investigate the sunset.
Right, amongst the many components that have been purpose placed on the top of Tahanga Hill is this very, very special stone, which is the hub stone of the hill. And it's typical.
You get the idea. So it's really it's just funny, really. They find rocks and start claiming them as being purposefully put there, and another one is this. They call it the Kaimanawa wall. And all it is a rock that has had water come through it, like through cracks in it. And those cracks are quite straight. In fact, maybe I actually have a video of this. And they claim it as being a human-built wall. It's silly billies. The mystery of the Kaimanawa wall.
I'm here by the Kaimanawa Wall, and this has baffled people for about 3 decades nearly. Recently, we've been given permission from the Department of Conservation, in conjunction with the local Maori iwi, to hire a geotechnical company to do a ground-penetrating radar scan of this area, just to see what lies underneath our feet.
They're going all out, man. These people are going all out, trying to prove some. What do you think their conclusions are? I'm not going to watch. I can't be asked watching. They. Another characteristic is obviously that they can't even pronounce the place names correctly. Every place name you've heard on video has not been a correct word at all. It's yeah, and yeah, this is ancient aliens. This is ancient aliens shit. Yeah, but the thing is that it's linked. It's linked to these people. I think it's quite cool to imagine fairies and stuff. And there's another big myth is so there's Māori tales of a group of people who it's like sort of the equivalent, I guess, of European fairies or something. I think they're called Pautapaere, and that became appropriated by these European cryptoarchaeologists. Patupaerehe. Yeah, so that became appropriated by these cryptoarchaeologists who started using that as the basis to say that it proves that there was people living amongst ancient in the ancient times. So Patupaerehe were light-skinned and red-haired, according to legend, according to the stories. And instead of just being like, oh, that was an indigenous fairy tale. And I'm not saying it like to belittle it as like a fairy, like a lot of tales, a lot of history gets belittled by Europeans as being fairy tales as well, I must say. But instead of looking at it in terms of, okay, this is, there's a lot of tales in this country which are really beautiful, rich tales. The rest of the world knows us as Middle Earth, which really gets on my goat because this country has its own tales, and they get viewed through a European lens. And so the rest of the world comes to view us through that European lens. They don't, like if you've seen that the Disney, the closest an international, I think the closest Europeans or international audiences have come to see the sort of the indigenous tales in the way they should be. It's probably been the Disney film Moana, and even that people will say is flawed, but. When you see people, people come here and they start talking about it in terms of through the prism of their own colonized perspective, and so even me, I'm trying to talk about it in terms of being fairies, but they were their own thing, and so yeah, there's these people called Patupaerehe, and they get, and so these people who can't even pronounce the language, who don't even know the language, come through. They hear these stories and then they go, yeah, they're an ancient Cree people in this country, and they start creating their own little mythologies around it. It's really, yeah, ancient white man. Yeah, the ancient white man, and it's like so. That the whole Lord of the Rings thing's interesting too. Just to kind of complete sidebar here is that Tolkien's Lord of the Rings was him trying to recapture what sort of stories that England had before the colonization of the French conquest of 1066, and also the industrialization. He had these kind of he had this sort of mythological. He was a mythicist. He was interested in ancient languages and all that kind of stuff, and And so he was trying to, a lot of English culture got wiped out by the French, and he was trying to, when you read Lord of the Rings, that was an earnest attempt at trying to recreate a kind of sort of stories that people would tell each other around fires before the French came and gave them a language that wasn't theirs. And Tolkien, obviously, that's why there's a lot of far-right people who maybe appropriate Tolkien. But you come here and you see that same sort of thing. This sort of is evident. You have a pre-colonized people, they become colonized, and their stories get retold through a particular eyes, a particular gaze, a colonizer's gaze, if that's the correct term. So it's quite, again, it's stupid. It's weird. Yeah, it's Ancient Aliens. It's yeah. And then I think there's one other story I had here: the mystery of the cavers searching for giants. So this was just in February of this year. This happened, and a secretive group excavating a cave they believe is filled with a race of pre-Polynesian giants have iwi and archaeologists worried. They were basically disrupting this cave system. I don't think they had permission to. They were just trying to find, they believed, for no real evidence. Oh, yes, they did have evidence, which turned out to be moa bones. Moa being my channel's namesake, which was a large flightless, now extinct bird. People seem to like to say that it gets sighted now and again. But, where is the... Am I even going to get here? Oh, yeah. So they say this bone belongs to giant pre-Polynesian human and could be more than 2,500 years ago. Experts say it's likely to be a moa. Like with the and they would say, well, that's what the experts are trying to cover up. Those experts. If you go onto the comments of those videos that we just grazed over, they will say Department of Conservation they're telling you it's true because it's on the sign, but if you know the real story, they find ways to reconcile these kind of try and make these fanciful stories real. They want these stories to be real, and that's when it gets a bit racist. That's the word I was looking for. Racist. Yeah. So am I a person who will dislike the Lord of the Rings films? Yeah, see now, sorry Jamie, you don't get me started. That was actually so I have about, the reason I'm doing these live streams is I have dozens of half-finished video essays, because I'm trying to be really perfectionist and trying to, they never get finished. And one of them was about just the bullshit. Lord of the Rings is bullshit. And the part of the bullshit, the movies, I'm talking about the movies. I mean, I don't have anything against the literature. The literature is it's fine if you like it. I'm not gonna. It's not, but it's the whole, what those films have done to this country. I find have been. It angers me. It really angers me, and like, it's increased our tourism industry. And that's the only reason that people will give it an allowance, give it in this country. You have to like them because they've done so much for our tourism. But if it wasn't for that, what do we get out of it? We don't get anything at all out of it. We don't get a film industry. It's a film business. It's one particular person's film business, who does nothing for local creative industry. He runs this town like a citadel. I'm mouthing off because this is a live stream, and if you clip this, whatever. But no, I think it's Peter Jackson I'm talking about, yes, just in case. And the production, yes, so that was part of what demotivated me from finishing my video. Was there was already one that had been done and seen by a zillion people, and that was that one. There was obviously so Peter Jackson, he's a union buster. Part of the reason he gets these films made is because New Zealand's become a very enticing place to shoot outsourced productions, because Hollywood can get crews at non-union rates. Excuse me. And they can... Oh, I could just talk about all that shit. But culturally as well. So culturally, he hasn't done any... the Lord of the Rings hasn't done a lot for us, if anything. What it's done is it's made, when people think about New Zealand, they think about Middle Earth, and I don't think that's helpful, because we have our own stories, we have our own culture and our own traditions. And yeah, she just liked the Hobbit trilogy. Yeah, okay. I'm just watching my viewers just drop off. So no, Lord of the Rings is great. Fucking A. Lord of the Rings, yeah. So so the thing is that these people have these sort of maybe they have sincerely think, oh, if we only found the giants, the ancient giants, or fairy people, or find out who built these who placed these rocks, do you know? Other than seismic forces and this is where you get into some really cranky. This is where so this is where it leads you. This is where it leads you to people like this guy, who has his own little catchphrase, got his own little YouTube channel. Is New Zealand's history true?
Yes, folks. Today I want to question what our true history is. Was New Zealand settled by Maori first, or was it settled by Europeans first?
Good question.
Now, I think there's enough evidence out there to suggest that our history is false, or at least partly false. But our government just doesn't seem to want to go there and find out what the real truth is. Now, for this video, I've taken a lot from Anne Plum's documentary, and I've posted a link to it simply because it's very well worth watching.
That documentary's been taken off YouTube because it's hate speech, by the way.
Watching the whole documentary. But to set this off, we need to go to a book called To the Ends of the Earth, written by Maxwell Hill and presented by Phil Young. The real truth.
Yeah. So basically, this guy, I've just discovered this gentleman. He you're seeing that BitChute thing now. Okay. Yeah, he's a real. This guy is just a dopey redneck, I'd say. They're not very sophisticated. Just like that Lee Williams guy earlier, and this guy, they're not. How do I say this kindly? They're quite simple. They're simple people. They're not really. They're taking these ideas and they're running away with them. So when you get to this, he starts going really fucked up. So so part of this whole excuse me, part of New Zealand, I guess, I'm not going to use the word decolonizing, but we're most, as I might have said earlier, most mainstream New Zealand accepts that Maori culture is integral to this country and our national identity. And there's a lot of politicking around that, because if you're European, it could mean you're just appropriating Maori culture, like cherry picking it and just embracing only the bits you like, and rather than the whole thing. You've got to embrace the whole thing. And there's a lot of, so the when He Whakaputanga was signed in 1835, it was Maori was the language of this country, and 95 odd years later, I don't know, 200 years later, it's English is predominantly spoken, and English is our default language, but it isn't our official language. Maori is New Zealand's official language. New Zealand Sign Language is also an official language. English is a de facto language. It's the de facto official language because it's everywhere, and it's on all the government documents, and our laws are written in English. But Maori, because it's our official language, it needs to be not just protected, but it needs to be spoken. It needs to be excuse me. It needs to be more in circulation, and so one of the moves of that Maori will be a compulsory language is inevitable. It will be inevitable. It'll happen in either in the next. I'm pretty sure this government signposted it for the next parliamentary term, but this guy has big opinions about that, which we're going to see. Also, they're racist opinions, because he doesn't even shield his racism. He doesn't even. This is actually really quite shocking for me as a New Zealander, because maybe you hear this occasionally on talkback radio. You might see it on a Facebook comment, but to hear someone say this, I'm not in these circles at all. I've never met anyone like this, and since I've returned in the last 5 years. Where is it? I've got to watch this shit. Ugh. By the way, this video was removed from YouTube because it's hate speech. That's why we're watching it on BitChute.
Yes, folks, New Zealand children will soon be forced to learn te reo. Now, te reo...
By the way, it's called te reo. It's not called te reo. But that's just me.
...is the Maori language, for those who don't know. And this will happen regardless of whether parents want this to happen or not. And of course, some radical Maori will argue that this is justified because they had their language stripped away from them. And they did have...
Yeah, like... Do you see how he's just like, yeah, some, what did you call them, Maoris had their language taken away from them, but whatever.
Their language stripped away from them. But that simply doesn't justify the forcing of an unwanted language on the majority of New Zealanders.
Imagine grizzling about forcing a language on someone, as if, like, does he not even... The cognitive dissonance is just so... Does he not see that? Like, the hypocrisy of what he's saying. It's just... And he goes... I'm not going to watch this whole video, but he starts picking out words, and this is some serious redneck shit. Like, this is stuff which no serious person would talk about.
WH words like what, when, where, and why, etc., with a W sound. In other words, they're told to pronounce them exactly how they're spelt. And then they're told to pronounce words like Wakatani with an F sound.
It's called
in Whakatane.
Yes.
In other words, pronounce them differently.
He's complaining about how Maori words are spelt. He's saying that because a WH sound is pronounced with it's called a diaphthong. I don't know what the actual. Oh, jeez, I just. WH words in are pronounced with a f sound in Maori. So the word he's got there he's got whangakoko, whangamarino, whangamata, and whangamoa. And if you're a white Pākehā, and you're like a lazy racist like this chap, he'll go, that's wangakoko, wangamarino, wangamata, and wangamoa. That's how they'll pronounce it, like they see it in English. And it's actually really quite it's what's the most derpiest thing about this take is that Māori is actually the most phonetic. The way it's written in English is almost more phonetic than English. Like, English is one of the most difficult languages because there's so many there's so many exceptions to so many rules. So few, and I could just one could just bring up so many English words and say, how do you pronounce that? If you hadn't heard it by ear, anyone who's learnt English would agree. And I guess that's also another characteristic of Britain, America, United States of America, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, is that people who learn English are generally monoglots. They don't. Once you've learnt English, once you learn English as a native speaker in an English-speaking country, you tend not to go out of your way to learn other languages. And so this guy gets really offended. He's almost like he thinks he's in a foreign country or something, just because he has to make a tiny bit of effort to pronounce place names. These are place names. Like, actual place where he lives, he can't even bring himself to pronounce correctly, or even know what the word is. It's just unbelievable. And that's colonization. That's like he isn't even engaging with it's not just the indigenous culture, but the actual land itself. He doesn't have that connection. I'm really interested to know what some of these like YouTube neo-Nazis think. Like they don't really, you don't hear them actually discuss this discourse, get into this discourse, because obviously in England the white people are indigenous, and in America indigenous issues I don't think are really spoken about, just because they've managed to wall off Native Americans. So we don't. Just the idea that how would an American person react to the idea of having to learn Native American languages at school? Because it'll be a different argument. You'd have to find a different argument than English is their official language, wouldn't you? Well, funnily enough, my Native American friend. So this is our Yoko Hiyoko. So this is. Are you my Twitter friend? Just so I know that I'm speaking to the right person here. Is this Coyote? Because it'll be really interesting to hear your perspective maybe later. Maybe you could, if you're on Skype or something, you could. Oh no! Okay, so no. Okay, this is good. I actually have even more interest. Other people who are tuned into American Indigenous rights. So that's quite cool. How the American? I don't hear American alt-right people talking about Indigenous issues. And I only ever hear left-wing people in America talk about Indigenous issues when they want to make a cheap point about immigration. The only people who can complain about immigration are Native Americans. And while that might feasibly be true, that's all they'll say, and that's it. They don't have any other engagement with what Indigenous people might even think about these issues. So. It's one of the things which separates. One thing which separates this country, New Zealand, from many other Anglophonic, they call it the Anglosphere, the former Commonwealth, the former settler colonies, is that they we have a very outspoken native. Not to say that other colonies don't have native indigenous people don't have a voice, but in this country, indigenous people have a platform, and indigenous people will be heard. They're not necessarily listened to. To make that tiny distinction there, but certainly the fact that we have a party who's going to make indigenous language, Māori, Te Reo Māori, a compulsory subject doesn't mean that we're going to. It's all going to be sweet now for race relations in this country, but it certainly looks maybe there's a better cultural development happening than people who might live side by side with Native Americans and haven't even bothered to learn, I don't know, Diné or want it like a Navajo language or something like that, and even make that interface, because the expectation is always that if you're a Navajo person and you speak Diné, you have to come to your American European culture. American European culture won't go and interface with Diné. So yeah, that's interesting, Jamie. English isn't legally recognised as an official language in the States, and I heard that they were toying. Correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't the American settlers toying with making German the official language? Like they no one spoke German. I think there were a few German settlers, but they wanted to make German, I think, as some kind of I guess when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they had everything to play for, so they could have just decided this is the kind of a society we want to live in. What's the ideal? What's the coolest language? I think that might have been what they were thinking. Let's go German. It never happened though. But I'd like to. Maybe I'll Google that rather than talking about it without knowing shit all about it. But yeah. So these people, they belong to. I'm going to take away this colour thing here so you can see better. They belong to this group. This is the formalised group. They call themselves Hobson's Pledge. Now Hobson was the guy who oversaw the signing of the treaty, the Treaty of Waitangi. He was I guess he was the governor. If you're a New Zealander, please tell me. I have to reread my Claudia Orange book, but. They have this little myth. They have a little sort of myth going on that after the treaty was signed, he shook every chief's hand and said, "We're all one now. We are moving forward as one," which sounds really nice, but that's not actually what happened. That's not what the treaty says. They have their own little conspiracy sort of truther kind of thing where they found their own little draft of the secret draft of the treaty with special conditions, and it's really gross. But and they actually have, I wouldn't say mainstream clout, but their spokesperson is a former political leader here, so he does get heard. And people gravitate around him, so he does lead a sort of movement of sorts. And one of this guy's name's Don Brash, used to be the guy who used to run the Reserve Bank of New Zealand became a crazy racist. Like he became he started like, oh my lord, this guy, and he's so weird too. So they're always weird, but. One of his sort of, I guess, what would you call it, hangers-on is this guy. His name's John Ansell. John Ansell, I think, as well. Again, I don't want to get too deeply into the issues they have, but I think he's a bit bipolar. He has these I can tell he has these sort of manic streaks where he just. And it's a real spectacle, and I feel a bit guilty watching it because it's like the guy's, he's doing it and going on television and giving this racism to us, but like we're a captive audience, and I don't know, how do I feel about showing this, do you know? But this is John Ansell. Again, they don't actually learn the language. This is the silliest thing for me is that...
Not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
That's not the one. I don't even know why I'm... Okay. They don't learn the language. They don't, did I just get... You're actually looking at my YouTube screen now, my studio screen, aren't you now? And you could actually... Okay, this is not good. I'm sorry. This is just killing me. Thanks for toughing it out if you are still here, because I'm really... I'm going to put this one up. I'm just going to go straight to the next one. Which is John Ansell in a toga. Oh my lord. Unsurprisingly, he is a obsessed with Western civilization. So, just as these people, this is why these people on YouTube, these Jordan Peterson, Stefan Molyneux types, their racism, I think, is more keenly felt here, because it's pretty clear what they mean when they say Western civilization as a code word for whiteness. So this guy's about to gate crash a Merrill Hustings in Wellington, the city I live in, or live near. And he's off his tree.
Well, hello. This is Cleisthenes, the father of Athenian democracy here, about to sally forth into the lion's den. It might be mixing cultures. Yes, it's very hard to assemble a toga in a Toyota, I have to say, but I shall be exploring the concept of democracy with the Emperor Emperor Justin, or as some people are taking to call him, tossed out, which bit of wishful thinking there. We'll see how this goes.
He's not actually British. He's putting on a funny accent. He's a right kook, this guy. Yeah, what the hell is this guy? Yeah. Well, so he turns up in this Merrill Hustings, and where the Mayor of Wellington's speaking, who gives a good answer, a great answer to his question. But if you can't hear it, I'll recap afterwards. But he's sort of...
It's John Ansell is my name. This question is for the Mayor. Mayor Lester, you say in your brochure you're making Wellington the fairest little capital. Can you please tell voters watching my Facebook live stream by what curious inversion of the word fairness was it enthusiastically planned to keep demoting on more and more council signs the language spoken by 100% of Wellingtonians below the language spoken by 4% of Wellingtonians without Wellingtonians' consent? And do other candidates share the Mayor's definition of fairness?
Very happily.
Here in Rednecks, Newtown.
That came up with the iwi and kiwi signs?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. There's a lot.
Is that an argument? Is that an argument?
Not an argument.
My children and their children will be. There will come a point in time, I believe, where every single New Zealander will speak fluent Te Reo, and they'll struggle to get a job without it, because that'll be part of who we are. What makes us different as a country, and what makes us different to every other Anglo-Saxon country, or any country for that matter, and that's our Te Ao and Te Reo Māori heritage and the culture that it brings. It's not just enough to say, yeah, we like the haka, but we don't like any other bit of the culture. I stand up and I support people who have had their confidence diminished for more than 150 years, and your question is an absolute disgrace.
Thank you.
So if John Ansell gets humiliated, I don't know. I don't think he has any sense of shame. That guy, he's clearly a unique character. Right? Yes. Well, Jane, yeah, I don't recall. I think so. Shortly after, like after that, Lester, the mayor who you saw there, he got voted out, and he's been replaced by by Peter Jackson's preferred candidate, who's going to, award Peter Jackson's enact all Peter Jackson's wishes. But he did actually particularly with the library and a lot of the correspondence, he was prioritising Te Reo Māori, and almost to the extent of removing the English. But I actually think that the only way this country will sincerely adopt Te Reo Māori as a spoken language in public spaces, like it should be, is if the government just says you have to now. I think that maybe like what Israel did to restore Hebrew, you kind of have to maybe put or decide, like maybe do an opt-in thing where you have to opt in to get all your government correspondence in English, and all of your government correspondence is received in Te Reo Māori, and then if you have like a tax you owe the Inland Revenue, you have to find that out soon enough. If you have to speak the language, because this is only what Māori people have had to adapt to 100 years ago. So it's not difficult to. I mean, learning a new language it's not the hardest thing in the world. French people speak English all the time, and they don't necessarily like the English. So yeah, what a contrast to the atmosphere in the UK right now. Yeah, I mean our political climate is right now. We're in this current sort of post-COVID-19 euphoria. I think this is probably what the Iranian Revolution felt like. I think that I'm joking, by the way, but I think at the moment our Prime Minister is apparently the most popular Prime Minister this country's seen in the last 100 years. And that's quite a statement. So I don't know if those statistics quite back the polling quite backs it up, but she's very popular. And if an election was held yesterday, Labour Party, which she is the leader of, would absolutely dominate. And we're getting a few policies that get enacted here and there. We've got a coalition government, so you have to. It's about three different parties working together to enact policy. So it can be quite fraught. And Labour people are hoping that there will be a supermajority in 4 months' time, and then there will be a lot of these kinds of a lot more Labour-y type policies will get enacted very quickly. So you'll find that that stuff like making Te Reo Māori compulsory will probably happen very quickly. So yeah. For some reason I have to moderate some of these messages. Tories are really fucked up. I guess because you used the word fucked, it didn't appear straight away. Yeah. But yeah, so that's Ansell. Do I have anything left to show? Well, I actually do have a music video, which I found, which only had which shamefully was only seen by 772 people. So this is yeah. Patupaerehe. They've actually, I think that's a misspelling. It's Patupaerehe. And, yeah. And I like this because it's Māori music and it's a Māori person telling their own stories. So just to dovetail what we had earlier, we had some old guy doing a talking about mythical stones on a hill. You might have seen, you might think about New Zealand, you think about Middle Earth. These are Māori stories being, who tells the stories on this land? Well, now you can see a Māori person do a Māori fantasy tale, which I like. So. She's playing on an instrument called a putorino, which is like a flute. I actually haven't seen it. I only just got the first bit, and I hope she murders them. Anyway, that's quite cool. I think that's really cool, and it's a real shame that this only got viewed by 772 people, and it's yeah, she's a patupaerehe, so she's a fair-skinned red-haired Maori fairy, and she plays a putorino. So it's talking about a tangi te putorino. So that they're singing about, she's playing the flute and getting up to naughty tricks, basically, and it's a story, and it's a story which has been told for 1,000 years in this country, and I like that people are owning the story and telling that story themselves, and it's cute and it's beautiful, and we can all enjoy it, and you don't have to have this guy dressing up as a toga. Like gate crashing, complaining that English isn't spoken enough. Like I feel so. I'm trying to leave this live stream on a high note. So look this song up if you wanna hear the rest of it. And yeah, so the Spanish can get the fuck over it. I don't know what that's in relation to, but yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I don't know. But so yeah, thanks for coming, and I'm not sure if I'm getting more confident, but I'll try and be a bit better at my presentation for next time. So thanks for coming, yeah.